Let's talk about the DSS. The Democracy Space Station has been built up ever since we first liberated the blueprint, and construction began 2 months ago. Ever since then, every other major order, barring some filler in between, has been designed around its completion, staffing, and fueling. After many hard fought battles, we reached a pivotal moment in the galactic campaign. The Jet Brigade had returned to the galaxy, starting with an offensive power of 58, a power level far higher than anything in recorded history as far as enemy strength is concerned, that would need to be worn down over several defensive operations. We deployed our Helldivers to the best of our abilities, but the Jet Brigade quickly became aware of the location of the Democracy Space Station parked over Gulliver. They then began to advance towards it, plotting its destruction. In the final hours of the defense of Mastia, the space station had finished fueling. The Helldivers rejoiced as the space station had come online to save the day. We finished our current operation on Mastia and then went to process all the new information we were to behold upon opening its menu. Except when we did, we were met with a mixture of shock and disappointment. The in game UI for the DSS conveyed about as little as we've come to expect from Arrowhead, considering their inability to give us even 30% complete information in regards to their weapons, or any form of bestiary, but this was different. The DSS asks you to vote on where it hovers above, and the majority of the community took one look at this and said, "Oh, Mastia is still under attack. Maybe the DSS can reinforce Mastia and save the day." What this seeming majority failed to read was the part of the UI that informs the player the movement occurs once per 24 hours. This meant the DSS would move to Mastia after we, in reality, still needed it on Gulliver to aid in the defense against the next assault from the Jet Brigade. This was already enough to spark a great deal of discourse within the community, as there was no way to take your vote back. Anyone who had contributed to sending the DSS away from Gulliver had potentially contributed to the failure of the major order. As the Jet Brigade offensive force was still much too great for the Helldivers to defend against unassisted by the DSS. Upon reading the tactical actions the DSS could provide you, you are met with yet more half baked features, lacking proper descriptions as to what the hell they do and how they work. From the in game UI, you could work out that the barrage would fire barrages at the planet the DSS was parked above, and the vague descriptor that it would aid us in liberation progress during offensive campaigns. But by how much? Is it a modifier on your influence gained per operation? Does it decrease the enemy's regeneration on the planet? We don't know. And there was no way to know. The Eagle Storm would deploy Eagle strafing runs and Eagle airstrikes onto our enemies while slowing the enemy's progress during defensive operations, effectively granting us more time. But how much time does it grant? Again, we've no idea. The blockade says it can stop an attack from the enemy, but can it stop already ongoing attacks? Does it prevent attacks from beginning, or can it magically cancel them like you've just won a gambit? Again, no idea. We've no way to know. Upon further inspection, these tactical actions activate upon being fully funded. Great, but are they just going to activate when full? That seems pretty wasteful considering we could potentially activate these when they're not necessary or helpful, right? Especially with how often and frequently the landscape of the war changes, coupled with a full day of travel time. But what provided to be the worst offender was the fact only one of these actions activate at a time. Now, the others would activate upon the previous action ending, making it even more difficult to plan out when these actions would come online relative to the DSS's location. This all culminated for the DSS arriving on Mastia, leaving Gulliver to its fate, feeling as though all was lost. Mastia had a great amount of regen rate, undoing 4% of our progress per hour, making its starting percentage of 50% null and void, as there was absolutely no hope of overtaking Mastia to perform a gambit at that time. This got our strategists thinking within the community. While we know the barrage would start first, we also knew that the Eagle Storm would begin right after. What if we organized to surge the polls with a flood of votes to send the DSS to Gulliver on the next cycle? The DSS would arrive with 9 hours to spare on Gulliver, and the trajectory at the time had us within 10% of a win should we have stayed the course. It made sense to go through with this plan, assuming the Eagle Storm would be of any help whatsoever, given it is meant to slow defensive campaigns down. Considering we were only 10% short of being on pace to win, we decided this was the best course of action. Now, on November 14th, the second round of votes began, and my community, along with many others, attempted to surge the polls with votes for Gulliver in an attempt to win the majority vote to our side. We figured the majority of voters for the DSS would simply pick whatever seemed to be winning. We wanted to make sure the DSS moved to Gulliver, as given the information we had, it was the only chance we had to win the major order. Even though Arrowhead had informed us that if the DSS was parked on Gulliver at the end of a failed defensive there, the DSS could potentially be critically damaged, it was the only path we saw to victory. So we took it. The vote surged towards Gulliver at well over 60%, and we knew our plan was ready to be put into action. Until, minutes later, Arrowhead intervened directly. They reduced the regeneration on Mastia from 4% down to 3, then from 3% down to 2, before affirming to the community that they should, instead of protecting Gulliver, now look to Gambit Mastia with an in-game message. This intervention from Arrowhead had undone the groundwork my community had laid. We watched in horror as the majority of our forces quickly left the defense of Gulliver in favor of Mastia thanks to receiving these new orders in game from Arrowhead. And thus, the railroad to pain and suffering was set. Because of their intervention, it quickly no longer became possible to defend Gulliver. Our only hope became to work through 100% progress on Mastia with a 2% regeneration rate with the orbital bombardment active from the DSS. But because we had made the decision to shift the DSS to Gulliver, as it was the best decision we could make at that time, the only path to victory available, the DSS was now resigned to leave the battlefield of Mastia in 24 hours, parking itself on Gulliver just in time to be potentially critically damaged by the Jet Brigade following a failed defense. But what if we win the Mastia Gambit? We can still save the DSS, right? Well, we would. But the untested orbital bombardment has a tendency to shell as many Helldivers as it does enemies, making matches on Mastia very unenjoyable for a large portion of the population, as its current implementation is centered around the Helldiver in a similar fashion to a traitor barrage. As of recording, the only way we'll save this major order now is if Arrowhead tweaks the regen behind the scenes, granting the community a scripted win on Mastia, as we've fallen far behind the curve on the offensive. And thanks to Arrowhead's meddling, falling far behind the curve to protect Gulliver directly. Now, I'm often the last person to get upset enough about something Arrowhead does to commit a full video on it, and I'll certainly never make 18 of them in the same month. But I think we need to have a heart to heart about what's transpired today. Thanks to the lack of transparency with the DSS's functionality leading up to its hot drop into our laps, we immediately made a poor tactical decision, and to some degree, that's on us. However, a lot can change about the Galactic War within a day, and being able to change your vote is probably going to be particularly important if you also plan to be interfering on a daily basis by changing the rules, the numbers, and the high command dispatch after the vote has already begun. You then railroaded us away from Gulliver, I'm assuming feeling it was optimal timing to try to teach the community what a gambit was, which ruined the community's original plan to protect Gulliver and forced us to be slaughtered by your untested content for 24 hours. None of this was okay. The clarity of in game mechanics needs to be improved, especially when implementing new massive features. Your community isn't stupid. We can do basic math, we can understand numbers. Not everything needs to be a vague description when the majority of your player base are adults between the ages of 20 and 30. The railroading should never have happened. If we make a mess, let us figure out how to fix it. The first movement to Mastia was on us as a community. Not enough of the player base fully understood what they were doing when they made that original vote, and that blunder stood to cost us the MO. Despite this, we had a plan to fix it. We had a plan to win, and it was a damn good plan. You not only took this away from us, but also created a scenario by railroading us to Mastia, where our decision to move the DSS to Gallivare to defend directly had suddenly become the wrong decision solely due to your meddling. You replaced our plan with a railroad to Mastia, where, as a leader, I was given no other choice than to tell those who follow me in the Galactic War our one and only chance of winning was now to go get shelled by your untested content instead of our original plan. Now, I ask you, how are we meant to feel our choices matter when you are willing to step in on a daily basis and change the rules up on us? The railroading needs to stop. Let the players make their decisions as advertised and stop directly interfering, especially if that interference is going to make the situation even worse for us, like it did here. You also need to get the test server up and running. There is absolutely no reason we should feel as though the DSS's orbital cannons have been hacked by the automatons with how often they are fragging our players. If you tested this whatsoever, I'm sure an obvious problem among your testers would have been seen from miles away, but you clearly did not do this. Instead, you're having to deploy emergency shield bubbles to aid us in not being fragged repeatedly by our own orbitals. I also fully expect Arrowhead to make the necessary changes behind the scenes, should it be necessary, to make sure we win this MO now, regardless, considering we are only in this mess because of them. If they don't and the DSS becomes disabled because they push the community to be shelled on Mastia, that would be an absolutely shocking L for them to take. And while you're at it, please improve the UI to accommodate a third grade reading and math level. Thank you to my coffee supporters who help keep the channel alive, and thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Vote for Rastanu. Very funny. Now face the wall.